Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this webinar today titled Inside Matters, Scaling Internal HR Services During COVID-19 and Beyond, and how internal help desks drive better collaboration, employee engagement and customer service. So we're going to cover a lot of ground today. Here's what we plan on covering. We'll start with an introduction to the speakers, telling you a little bit about Zendesk and what they do. Then we'll kick off today's discussion, addressing the challenging situations that the world finds itself in with COVID-19. After that, we'll discuss common challenges for employees around internal services. We'll then dive into our findings around the impact of Zendesk for internal help desk on employee experience. Alongside this, we'll share some best practice to help you implement these key findings and scale internal HR support services. Then we'll wrap up with the impact of doing so and with a Q&A, so make sure you get your questions ready. For now, I'm going to pass you straight over to Sarah and Darren, and take it away, folks.
Thank you, Kieran. Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Sarah Manning. I am Senior HR Director for Zendesk. I'm probably what you would call a HR lifer. This has been the entirety of my career spent in HR, I think from graduating out of college, joining a HR grad program, working as a HR administrator through to a HR generalist. I've dabbled in my time and, different pieces from reward to HR analytics, L&D, spent a good chunk of my time doing M&A, different acquisitions. But I think at the core, I'm probably a business partner. So I'm a HR business partner, true and true. I spent a good chunk of my career with BT. So for about 10 years I spent with BT. I was a business partner there for about 7 years. And then I was promoted up to HR director for my final 3 years. My remit at the time was UK and Ireland. And that was one of the attractions for me when I left there to join Zendesk. So I joined a Europe-wide role. I took on a Europe-wide role for Zendesk, where we have employees spread over 11 different countries across Europe. That was the initial role I took on with Zendesk. And then little did I know that about 1 to 2 years in, my role would expand further on a full global remit. So I now manage my own team who are spread over 4 different continents and an employee base around the world. So partnering with leaders from our head office in San Francisco right through to some of our leaders in Singapore. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Darren?
Thanks, Sarah. Morning, everybody. My name's Darren Parker. I look after customer success for EMEA West. And I've got a really varied background, actually, from designing service solutions for GCHQ to running the voting networks, also at BT, actually, Sarah, running the voting networks for Britain's Got Talent and X Factor shows like that. I've been at Zendesk now for a couple of years. I've been in SaaS and customer experience for a lot longer than that, and it's always sort of helping large organizations to just get the most out of their investment in their customer and employee experience programs.
Cool, thanks, Darren. To kick off then, that's a little bit about us, to tell you about Zendesk, so the company we work for. As I mentioned, we're a global organization. We were founded in 2007. Although our founders are Danish, we were actually originally founded in Copenhagen. We are headquartered now out of San Francisco. Our European headquarters is Dublin, which I don't know if you can tell. I don't know if I've lost my accent. Maybe I haven't over the years with spending a lot of time recently in the States and various places, but I am here in Dublin, so where our European head office is, and it's over now, this is our official numbers, over about 3,800 employees globally. Across Europe, it's coming close to 1,000 within this particular region. What we do is we build customer service and engagement solutions to help businesses provide the best customer experiences. We have more than 150,000 more than 150,000 businesses from over 160 countries trust Zendesk to provide the best customer experiences in more than 60 languages. So our customers represent a range of industries, from software to healthcare to retail, education, government, and we operate at a huge scale. So like over 1.4 billion customer interactions are processed with Zendesk every year. To make that sound real, because I say that to my family members and they're like, huh, what do you do? So to make it hit home, you probably use Zendesk every day and may not know it. So a lot of the brands that you interact with on a daily basis are probably using Zendesk. So for example, if you've paid a bill with First Utility, or you have a query or an order in with Deliveroo, you've probably been using Zendesk. So this is, we kind of pride ourselves, one of our kind of positioning statements is that we want you to be the company that your customers want you to be. And from me, I'd always look at it at the angle from be the company your customers and your employees want you to be. And in this era of changing customer expectations, we help companies be what their customers really want them to be. We provide the solutions companies need to fully understand their customers and deliver seamless, personalized experiences. So bring back to today, like in terms of how that relates to employee experience, as we all know, and many HR professionals on the call, our employees are our internal customer. Like that's not new information. Like that's simply who we serve are the internal customers. And many of Zendesk customers have actually found by using our software actually internally, it brings that same kind of consumer-like experience to their employees, and allow for that better employee to employee level of engagement, and actually treating your employees like giving them that type of consumer service that you'd expect from some of the brands that you admire. And I found it too. So as I said, I have a varied industry history. I only entered kind of the SaaS world about 3 years ago when I joined Zendesk, but one of my biggest observations at the time was I was so impressed with how engaged the employees here were, who are, our internal customers. Engagement was and continues to be very high for us. And how one of the things that I noticed was how we engaged with those customers. And I was so impressed. It just the seamlessness, and we'll dig into this a little bit later, of just having a simple functionality. So all our employees, and I'll just get into a little bit of detail now, we'll touch on it more later. So for all of our employees, for me and HR, our global HR teams, we just have one handle. So we have people ops at, and that is a handle that people send any query into. It's very simple, very straightforward. It doesn't matter to the employee who they're looking for, where in the world they are, what their queries are relating to, because we have these triggers built that routes it to the right person. So there's very limited kind of triage needed on the back end. We have kind of smart triggers that will send. So if it's a benefits question, it goes to our benefits team. And it will also go to, if you're in London, it will go to the benefits team responsible for London. If it's a question relating to hiring, it will go route straight through to the right person. I was so impressed that actually, also I will note, I was full of new, new job, new change of job energy when I joined Zendesk, that actually I loved the tool so much that I actually asked my team to enter into the CIPD Awards back at the end of 2017, and we actually won for best use of technology in HR and people management that year. But I think that's a little bit about who we are. I think, as I spoke there for a few minutes, it almost felt normal. It almost felt as if the world hadn't suddenly changed around us, because the world isn't normal right now. We're going through some pretty dramatic changes as people, as employees, as businesses. We've all just been, adapting and reacting to like the unexpected challenges that I even saying the words COVID-19 has brought. I even had like my kids, it's the amount of time yesterday, there's times they use the word COVID-19 or coronavirus. Like I felt like, like almost like a swear jar of going, stop it. You're gonna have to put money in a swear jar if we keep talking about it. Anyway, so many people, for like many companies, HR teams are at the front of everything, that all those company decisions, like whether companies now in financial distress, or what's happening to your customer base, or can you still do what you do? And there's unfortunate situations for many of us, for many organizations, where they have to make that tough decision to let people go, and amongst lots of other things, and that's hard. And HR teams are often there at the very front of having to initiate those decisions. For other companies, it's what I'm doing right now. It's what Darren's doing. It's most of you on the call, I imagine. We're working from home. Like, this is the first time that, you know, many companies, if they're able to do it, are now operating 100% work from home. Like, I wasn't trained on how to advise our managers on how to do this. Like, this wasn't something that was in like, oh yeah, in case of global pandemic and everybody has to work from home, this is what we do. Like, none of us, from our people managers to those of us in HR, we weren't trained, you know, to deal with this. And I think, you know, if we look at when we support employee engagement, collaboration, productivity, all of those things that are super important, that's, you know, it's challenging at the best of times. But now, you know, the component of working from home, supporting a remote workforce at this time, it just makes it harder. You know, people today are already feeling anxious. You know, people today are more anxious than they were before this. Even those who are still employed and unable to work from home, which is a great position to be in. Simply living in such an unpredictable and unprecedented time is just unsettling. Like, we can't predict how the employees that we're supporting, you know, what they're actually going through on a day-to-day basis, like, and on an individual level. Like, we can put ourselves in their shoes and think about ourselves. Like, if I look at my own levels of anxiety, and I try to be quite calm mostly, but like right now, like, I'm dealing with 3 kids that need to be, I'm told, homeschooled, and I'm like, I'm not a good teacher, and this isn't my skill set. Plus, I have a full-time job. You know, I have, my aunt is in a nursing home, and there's a breakout of COVID-19. Like, my husband's business isn't doing that well. Like, and that's just me. You know, put yourself in the shoes of our teams, and there's so much uncertainty that they're going to, and we're all trying to do our best. But life is hard right now. So I think one of the things that, as, you know, HR professionals and as employers, that we need, that's more important than ever right now, is where we can influence. So where we can give some piece of stability, some piece of control back, in some, which is in their work life, the piece that we can influence, where we have some control, that we need to make sure we're doing that to the best of our ability. We need to make sure that our staff feel supported, and that we offer them the resources that they need to do their job to the best of their abilities. So I'll share a little bit here about what we're focused on in Zendesk, and there's probably 3 practical but important things that we're doing right now. So, you know, I know this might sound pretty basic, but open conversations, empathetic communications, like the example I just gave, like, to be compassionate right now is so important. You know, giving as many updates as you can, so employees feel they have the necessary information and support, and being responsive. Like, HR teams right now should ensure that they can also respond to feedback and questions. You know, COVID-19 has had the biggest impact on, you know, the necessity for clear, transparent, and empathetic communication. And even if that's acknowledging, do you know what, we haven't made that decision, or we don't know right now, but managing those expectations. I think one of the other things is, as I spoke about remote workforce, empower your workforce. And I think, you know, empowered employees require, as we know, kind of, you know, less supervision. They'll operate more efficiently. However, how do you empower somebody when, you know, a lot of managers are used to physically seeing their team right in front of them? And there's, for managers, that there's that that angst of having to operate without that presenteeism around you. But I think for the employee as well, knowing that you are empowered to do your work, and I think being flexible is going to be the most important thing. Like, you don't know someone's personal circumstances. You don't know if they are trying to, you know, or even not even having kids at home, but working just in a small space, like working in where you wake up in the morning, to having your desk and a laptop, and not potentially not leaving that whole space, just the mental impact that has on people. Or somebody might be dealing with, you know, the illness of a loved one. I think, you know, letting employees know that they are trusted to do their best, that they are within their own unique circumstances, trusted to do what works, trusted to operate within the parameters that they can work with on their manager by having that open dialogue and communication, being able to become empowered by knowing that they have that support and flexibility. I think thirdly for us is tools. I think, it's one thing to try and flip on its head and have them, just tell your workforce that, okay, we're going to try to figure out this working from home thing. It's having the right tools, right information available that employees need during uncertain times becomes even more important. Like, employees need to be able to do their job swiftly and without obstacles, and to be able to execute correctly. There are lots of different team collaboration tools out there. There's physical equipment that are needed, but I think having a great internal support service and an internal way of communicating is hugely important. Right there, I think, Kieran, I might pop back to you just to make sure I haven't lost the audience already to see if you want to ask a quick poll question.
Okay, fantastic. So yeah, the poll question should appear in front of you right now. Make sure you get your answers in as soon as possible. We'll give it about 30 seconds. So get those answers in now. Don't forget as well that we will have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar. So any questions that you have can be answered and will be answered. And I'm sure if we run out of time, our gracious hosts will get back to you. So we give it a couple more seconds now. Okay, if we wrap up around now, we can see. So the question was, how are your employees communicating during COVID-19 regarding working from home, healthcare cover, illness benefits, etc.? So we can see that the largest percentage of votes there has gone to a mixture of all of these, probably relatively unsurprising. The second most picked answer was via their manager at 33%. Third was via a HR help desk at 9%. 3% are not tracking, and 2% via self-service HR web form. Interesting results.
Yeah, I think it's that reliance on the managers is not unexpected. There's so much uncertainty going on at the moment that it's naturally the first person that they're going to reach out to. I think there's some implications there, Sarah, I think, in terms of the workload on the manager.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and you know what, and especially depending on if you've got a good relationship with your manager, they're always going to be the person you go to. I think one of my slight, and I think it's great, but I think one of the apprehensions, and I think that mixture question, which turned out top, is probably the reality for most organizations. My apprehension around that reliance on managers is that they're under so much pressure right now. Like, a manager, hasn't been, well, we've been trying to support managers and kind of during this time and leading a remote workforce, but it's hard. And one of the things was probably just consistency, consistency of message, and expecting every manager that, you have dotted around your organization to have all the answers, and that expectation and pressure it puts on a manager. Yeah, the more we can alleviate that, I guess, the more it can help. And I guess that brings us into, like, if we look at some of the purpose of our discussion today, as we try to achieve like a fantastic employee experience, it's hard enough right now without different technologies getting in the way. So we looked at a study by McKinsey. So according to a study by McKinsey, there are 3 major areas of dissatisfaction that employees have with internal services. So getting what they need, communicating with the organization. These are availability and clarity of information, the time needed to complete tasks required by support functions, and the effort required to go through processes often involving support functions. So that may not make many of us smile, but sometimes it is the reality for employees. The report also highlights the consequences of companies who don't address these challenges, including employees. And again, this is probably not rocket science for those of us working in this space, but obviously employee productivity as a result of being weighed down gets impacted. Being weighed down by inefficient processes can create kind of low morale, like decreased productivity. Another finding was it's also difficult then to attract and retain top talent. And we'll touch on this bit a little more later, but the quality of internal services ultimately has a direct impact on the experience of our external customers. Darren, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, so I think with that as a problem, we wanted to get a bit more information and see how Zendesk was helping. We worked with Culture Amp to evaluate just what the impact of the quality of that internal help desk on the challenge of maintaining and creating that engagement with your people. What does success look like? For those of you that don't know them, Culture Amp, they're a leading people culture platform. They work with names like Airbnb, Oracle, Adobe, and they get good insight about the level of engagement that their customers have inside their organization with their employees. From a Zendesk perspective, we have some mutual customers, some people that we work with together as well. So we shared customers between us. So we were able to start looking at what's the link between the product usage of that internal help desk with Zendesk and what they see from those customers around the survey around workplace perceptions and things. So so that was the basis of the study that we did, and some pretty interesting stuff came out.
Yeah, I think we uncovered, I think, 3 compelling insights from the study between Zendesk and Culture Amp, and the first being that a great internal help desk definitely led to higher employee engagement. It also led to better cross-functional engagement, cross-team engagement, and similarly, to reiterate the point made, relate that to McKinsey's point, companies who invest internally have happier employees, which translates to a better customer experience as well. Before we get into kind of deeper into the findings, maybe if we just spend a minute on touching on why employee experience has become such a big focus in the last few years. And I know I'm probably preaching to the converted here when I talk about employee experience, but I think it's worth reminding ourselves. According to a study done by Accenture, companies with great employee experience outperform the S&P 500, so top 500 largest publicly quoted companies on the, I think, the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ by 84%. So when employees feel valued and supported, they're willing to go that extra mile for the organization. Through leveraging internal help desk solutions, specifically, productivity increases by 20 to 25% on average because of that improved communication and collaboration amongst employees and teams. And because of this, I think a lot of what I've just spoken to, more than half of businesses are now prioritizing employee experience more than ever.
And it's not easy, right? This is a difficult thing to crack. If you look at the complexity of the different communications that you may have with your employees, it becomes hard to be consistent in the way that you motivate and engage your employees. If you look at just the sheer number of different systems and different resources that are available to you as an employee, it gets hard to find out where to go, right? It's hard to get those answers quickly. I think people get frustrated by what they then see. They then interpret that as a lack of transparency or a lack of investment or a lack of responsiveness to their questions. And I think this is something you've seen quite often, Sarah.
Yeah, I think it can lead to, I think you said it, like lack of transparency, like uncertainty about how decisions are being made or why they're being made. That on its own can cause concern and challenges. If people don't understand the why behind certain decisions, how do you expect your teams to really rally behind them? I think people can feel like they're only being informed instead of being involved. And there's a big difference there. Like an example could be, hearing about a decision to roll out a new system that will impact a particular team or an employee that's expected to use it every day without having consulted them at all. And as they're the primary users, they're the team that, they're the people that know best as to what they need. And it can cause, frustration to build, and an overall sense that we're not listening, that companies aren't listening to their people. When it comes to responsiveness, I think people lose momentum. Like, everybody knows how frustrating it is waiting for an answer. And especially right now, and I'll confess, as my, anxiety and stress levels are heightened, like I'm much more irritable. And I do get more frustrated. So I think, translating that into, what I'm working on, projects can get delayed, you lose momentum. But do you know what that leads to? Perhaps then customers don't get their answers fast enough, or they, it can have that level of impact on the customers you're trying to serve, or support, if your own employees lose momentum or lose their focus on what they're trying to do, due to frustrations of not themselves being able to get the answers they need. I think it also gives an overall impression of things just not being in order, like a sense of chaos or disorder, which really isn't what you want to portray, to give people confidence in your company. And especially today's environment, like, disorder is all around us. Like, this is kind of a living chaos that we're in right now. So what we need to do is to be able to provide a calm and clear working environment as much as possible.
And I think from the survey we saw, there are customers, there are companies out there who are doing that really well, and meeting those expectations from their employees, because this is critical to retaining talent. It is critical for the success of your organisation. And people's expectations have moved on, and we see this when we look at even just consumers when we survey our end customers. The expectation is so high. They want something that is going to be intuitive and integrated into that natural sort of workflow, the daily workflow they have. They want it to be as fast as possible, to get them accurate answers as quickly as possible. And they want to know where things have got to. They don't want it just going into a big black hole. They want to know that their question's been picked up, that it's being prioritized, and someone's going to get back to them, and setting expectations about when that's going to be. So if we dig into the findings then about what's the best practice that actually drives that, I guess the encouraging thing is we do see that, I think, that correlation between organizations that are using Zendesk internal help desk and those that are getting more engagement out of their employees. So those customers that are using Zendesk, they have an 11% better than the benchmark scores in terms of engagement. Now, when we talk about engagement, it's a term that we use a lot. So what does that mean to you when we say an employee is highly engaged?
Yeah, I'm sure lots of people on this call probably have a strong view on this in terms of what is employee engagement, or how do we define it? I guess for me, engagement represents a level of enthusiasm, and connection employees have with their organization. I think it's a measure of how motivated they are to take on, more work, to not necessarily more work, but I guess to take more positive action to further the organization. I think it's a clear sign of how committed somebody is to also staying in your organization. I think highly engaged companies are organizations where I think about 70% or more of employees respond favorably to questions around employee engagement, like in a survey. But yeah, I think on a practical level, I think it's that enthusiasm and connection to the organization, and that desire to want to drive your organization forward and drive it towards a collective success.
What does that translate into? What kind of behavior do you then see?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone, I think to answer that, you just put yourself in the shoes of yourself when you're feeling engaged. That probably doesn't make sense. But I think just to think of it personally, I guess, is a better way to phrase it. When you're engaged, or maybe when I'm engaged, I just feel more energized. I come up with better ideas when I'm feeling highly engaged. I feel I'm in a more positive mindset. Yeah, I think it gives you that kind of energy, positivity, and I think you just generally, in terms of like the outcomes and the actions taken, I am, and I think people tend to be just more likely to go that extra mile to push your organization forward. And I think you get that sense of being truly invested in truly invested in the purpose of the organization and being excited to just go and do it. I think, as I mentioned like before, I think you're also more likely to stay at your company instead of leaving to go somewhere else in terms of a tangible action from somebody that's more engaged.
So if we put ourselves in the shoes of one of our employees, you know, thinking about your own experience, I mean, how do you like to get help when you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, I'll confess, I'm not a millennial, but you know, from working with our, like a lot of the demographic, is that within Zendesk, and one of the things just from, you know, our own engagement surveys is that ability to self-serve. And I think, you know, if I think of myself, and especially right now, so right now, like, as I said, I have a global team, which means I work kind of funny hours anyway, but I also have 3 kids here, so I'm not working, regular 9 to 5 hours right now. So if I do need something, I really probably would prefer not to be reliant on a person to come back to me. So if there was any way of an immediate self-serve, that's probably my preferred choice. Yeah.
And I think that's in common with the research that we see and our own experience. If you look at the CX Trends report that we produce each year, you know, about 70% of people, their first instinct is to go and find the answer themselves. They'll normally start from an internal an internal help center. Actually, about a third of those will rate the service they get as bad if they can't find the answer there. So that expectation is really high. I think the next thing is that when they want to then reach out because they can't find an answer, they really want to be able to find some kind of a centralized portal that they can get to. So just one place to go, like you were saying. Actually, the item that you can see on your screen now, just scrolling through, that's ours. Actually, that's the Zendesk centralized support portal where we go and get answers for everything. And on top of that, we've then layered our own sort of answer bot, which is our AI technology, which is really great at answering the most common questions. And if someone hasn't had time to go and search for the answers themselves, it'll offer those, but then a quick option to then transfer into a web form or get across to an agent. And we try to make that available to wherever our people are. So we don't want them to have to go and hunting for this. If you look at some of the great customer stories we have, it's where they've really embedded that answer bot into either a mobile app or into their Slack channels, and it just gives that immediacy that people want when they have a question. Having that sort of centralized point means that you've only got one place to maintain for all of this information as well. It just generally makes it easier.
Yeah.
I'd say the other thing I find with that is that there's a general speeding up of the whole process as well, because it's getting people to engage in a much faster and more intuitive way. Do you think do you see that impacting overall engagement as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think when employees aren't weighed down by like inefficient processes or siloed information, I think they're able to be more productive and reduce time wasted from just waiting around or going back and forth or trying to find the right person or trying to find the information they need. And I think the time savings from these kind of more tedious and frustrating tasks clears the way for people to be able to get more done, and they feel more invested in, I think.
This is something that Tesco have done well as one of the case studies that we have. And they use our internal help desk to support 460,000 employees. And it's a mixture actually of their own internal team and suppliers and the people operations team. And they use Guide. They're getting to about 30,000 article views per week. And they're getting some fantastic results in terms of the number of just single touch tickets that are coming through. People come in with a query, get it resolved straight away. One of the things that I really love about this story and the way that Tesco have gone about it is their focus on the metrics. They had a real clear vision of what it was they wanted to achieve. And they actually set themselves targets and measured everything about the utilization of Guide and the improvement that gave them in terms of engagement and speed of answering. You can see the full story on our website. but it was all about the data right from the start. I think we've got a poll question coming now. Let's quickly move back to the audience for an answer to a poll question. You can pick that up, please, Kieran.
Hello again, folks. Right, so you should very shortly see that come up on your screen. The question is, what do you see as the biggest employee engagement challenge? So get your answers in now. We're all very keen to see what you have to say there. Don't forget as well to get your questions in. We've had quite a few coming in, but we would love to hear your questions, and we'll answer as many as we can at the end of the session. We'll give you a few more seconds to get those answers in. Have a think about it. Hope everyone's enjoying the webinar so far as well. I know I'm finding it very, very interesting. We've all had that experience of searching for information and coming up against a brick wall of inefficient data, inefficient answers. Okay, right, so if we call it there, here we go. So that question again is, what do you see as the biggest employee engagement challenge? And 48% of you said company culture. Wow, that's very interesting. And then the, well, joint second and third, lack of data. We don't really know what employees want, and something else, both at 15%. Following shortly behind, we don't have the right tools or technology at 13%. And finally, we're missing the right communication channels at 9%. Wow, that is very interesting.
Yeah, I think going back to the Tesco example I was talking about, I think one of the things they did really well was they had a real view of how they wanted technology to enable their culture. It wasn't the other way around. They really focused on that. And I think without that, it's easy to get lost in some of the technical parts of the project and forgetting the people. Okay, let's move on. The second finding from our study was really interesting, because we started to look at what are the other correlating factors between getting a good internal experience within your internal help desk and other things that are going on inside an organization. Collaboration is a key part. We can see that absolutely at the moment as we're all in distributed teams all working from home. And what I thought was interesting was just about 60% of people we surveyed who are using Zendesk internal help desk, they agree with that statement that departments in the company collaborate well to get the job done. And if you think about our jobs generally, that's a hugely important metric. Our ability to work across different silos to answer questions from our employees is a huge indicator of how efficient we are, I think, as an organisation. The McKinsey study that you mentioned, Sarah, so it talks about the idea that this collaboration and engagement, it's a mindset that you set right through your company, and what better place to start than the engagement that you have with your internal employees?
Yeah, for sure.
So the other thing that we found was really important to keep all that relevant information in one place. You need to carry that collaboration out seamlessly and automatically. Because in the same way that employees want one place to go to ask a question, so your internal help team should really have just one place to answer them. To do that, you need to have the right tools so you can get to solve the issues quickly. So a centralized workspace pulls all together all the relevant information that employees need, including advice and answers from other departments. So if you've got a question about HR policy, you can integrate an HCM software like SuccessFactors or Workday to automatically surface the employee's details, their role, their employee ID, their tenure, and just anything that helps you inform that answer back to that person, which really makes a difference in how quickly you can get back to them and how accurately you can answer that question. And then once you've got everything in one place, you can then start to automate those workflows or optimize those workflows by putting routing and escalation and collaboration processes. You do that via triggers and macros, workflow tools that enable you to automate a whole series of actions based on the context of the ticket that's come in. You can use skills-based routing, which is a way to automatically route those tickets to team members who have a particular, obviously particular experience or expertise in a particular area. So, a benefits question will go directly to your benefits analysts, and then using collaboration tools. So even if it's not in the immediate HR team, there might be subject matter experts elsewhere in the business that you might want to pull into that ticket and get advice from. So rather than sending your team to other systems that do that, then what we do is we try and have those integrations so that it comes into one place to manage that communication from. It's not enough to just have the tools. You have to invest the time in automating them and developing them so that you drive the best return on investment from them. Finally, automation and AI, we have that embedded into our solution, which basically makes it more flexible, it's more functional, and gives you scalability and a better return on investment. Because once you've got that standard routing workflow set up and you start looking at that data, if we're getting back to that, be really clear about your data, you start to understand what are the most common questions, what are the things that people are asking all the time. And you can use that automation and that AI to really scale up the way that you answer those questions, reduce overhead on your team, and leave your people to answer the more complex questions that really need that human interaction. So for, I think we have an example here on the right where, I've got a new iPhone, I need to connect my work email, I submit a question, the answer bot's automatically going to say, it knows where I am in that process. It's automatically going to offer me articles to be able to fix that, myself. At the end of that, I just say, yep, please, that's great, thanks very much. And then I'm done, and I can, if there's a follow-up that's needed, I can push to that. One thing I think that people struggle with, Sarah, is how do people know what's working? What metrics should they be using?
Yeah, and it's one thing that I probably struggle. It's one of the harder things for us to know, like how are we doing, especially with communicating with employees. But I think one of the things I've loved about joining Zendesk and seeing how we're doing it is we get CSAT. So customer satisfaction or employee satisfaction in our case. So every time a ticket is closed, so a query is answered, we invite the employees to rate their experience. Other things that I love that we can data at our fingertips is, time to first response. Like how long have we left? It's from someone raised a question. That time, like, is it minutes? Is it hours? Like, how are we managing that time to first response? How many people did we have to pull in? Was there a various number of touch points? And then ultimately the time to solve. They'd probably be the most important for me.
Cool. I think that when we look at the stats and those metrics again, generally what we're driving is just confidence and happiness for our employees. That confidence in terms of not just how well have you responded with that interaction with me, but I then translate that into how well is my company doing. If you look at some of the questions like that we ask people, do you have confidence in the leadership in your company? Where people have those good internal help desks, actually they're getting much better scores to that answer, to that question. They believe in their company's ability to do stuff because they're seeing it, they're experiencing it individually every day.
Yeah, and I think when employees see leaders that way, then they're steering the ship of the organization, and if people don't have confidence in them, they may not follow.
Yeah, so I think it's the confidence. I think there's this idea that by pulling all those answers into one place and employees seeing that, it drives that collaborative feeling across the whole company. And the other key thing is that is then translating into how successful you are as a company and how you're treating your end customers, not just your internal employees.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, no, I was just going to say that I think when you see that the leadership is investing in empowering people with the right tools and the resources that they need to achieve the company goals, then I think you have faith and trust in those leaders and in your organization that you feel invested in. And I think you become, as we've talked about earlier, like engaged and energized to do their absolute best.
Yeah, and that translates all across the piece. Organisations that have good internal help desks that drive that engagement, they have twice as many top performing reps with customer satisfaction scores in the top quartile. They're far faster to react to questions that are coming in. The solve times are much quicker, and CSAT generally across the board is just much higher. I think. That's in terms of the survey responses, the survey information that we've gone through. Do we have some questions that have come through?
Yes, we actually have quite a few to get through. So I will start off with, my company isn't great with collaboration. How can you foster a culture of collaboration?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question, but I think empowering, I think it depends. I would start small. So I think, to create a culture of collaboration, it needs to start for me kind of at a manager and team level. I think if you can train or somehow coach, and depending on the size of an organization or what an organization is willing to invest in, but I think as HR people, if we can work with particular managers, to empower them and to inform them on the importance of that collaboration, we can do it in small chunks. I think you can express the benefits that we get, use some of the data that we have here to explain some of the outcome benefits. And then I think work, I would either, you can go big and get kind of full on like leadership bought in. We need to be more collaborative as an organization, therefore we need to invest in tools, different collaboration tools like Slack, for example, or, Zoom that the whole world is using right now, and to help teams collaborate better. Or it's just even at a team level with your own team, and analyze and work with your own peers to say, okay, how could we work better together, and doing it in small chunks like that, and working with the managers that you're engaging with on a regular basis to see how can they, you can make it personal for their individual teams.
Have you got anything to add to that, Darren?
I just echo the fact it starts with us as managers and leaders. I think the research on culture is more leaning towards that. It's something that you can build just around you first, and that's the most impactful place to do it.
Fantastic. Well, I think this next question is one that is especially poignant at the moment, and something that all managers or especially all HR managers will be dreading. I've seen a drop-off in communication since lockdown came in. How can I get that back?
Yeah, it's hard. And it's interesting. We've probably seen at the beginning, we went big on communication. Like we went OTT purposefully. But actually we've seen a drop more recently. So actually we've seen more recently like Zoom fatigue. Like we have seen, and especially where we have different, and someone has said this to me before, especially where English, if your company works in English and it's not your native language, that makes it really hard if you're just on calls all day. So to go back to the question in terms of how you reinvigorate, I mean, I think as much as you can, I'd almost like poll some employees, just see what is it that they want and they need, because now is not the time to let communication drop. Like now, especially if your workforce is working remote, they have to feel supported. Like I would be nervous. Yes, as I've said, like within Zendesk, we're definitely, people are saying, okay, you've given us tons, just let me get on with my job now. So we're trying to strike that balance of like, because we introduced things and maybe this will be helpful, but we went so over the top. Like we introduced like morning just coffee chats. We then suggested over lunchtime, if someone's taking a break to have their lunch, just leave your Zoom camera on and make a cup of tea, chat to one of your kids, do it together as a team, by leaving the camera on. One other ones is that instead of like where we used to have had like maybe like manager time, somebody might just, we often had teams that wanted to just leave a Zoom on, that if anybody had a question for them, it was in their calendar, anybody could just drop into their particular call at any given time. So I think we went out with a ton of example of initiatives. There was huge uptake at the beginning, but now it's trying to find that balance, and we're trying to go out to our teams now to understand, okay, you're telling us there's a little bit of Zoom fatigue and meeting fatigue setting in, how are we better communicating? One of the other things actually is just videos. Like we've started using videos more recently, which is people can watch them in their own time. So people are getting a little bit tired because there's so much on email now and so much written, and there's so many meetings that you're invited to actually drop in a few videos with like leadership messages, or just even like I did, you know, some funny videos just for my team. Like at the end of a day on a Friday, I'll just wrap up to my phone, like looking like a complete idiot often, but just saying, hey, you know, this is what I felt I achieved this week. This is what I hope everybody's good, and then just posting it. Sending it out via Slack or whatever means you have for sharing stuff, are some ideas. I'm conscious of time and I could probably talk on this topic a lot.
I'm totally stealing that, Sarah, and that's a great idea. I think the other thing is just to change it up as well and have a balance between stuff that we're pushing and allowing in a formal communication, and allowing that less formal communication to happen as well, that might actually be employee led or team led. We try to get that in our group as well, so it's not just us talking at people all the time, but we're trying to keep it in both ways.
Yeah, and having it interactive I think is important, and I think you see some communications drop off if it's all, as Darren just said, they're all one way. I think the more interactive and inviting responses or inviting comments often helps.
Brilliant. Right, we will power on with another question now. This is a very interesting one, actually. What questions would you ask in an employee survey or other tool to measure employee engagement?
Yeah, one thing, sorry, Darren, I'm jumping in here, not even giving you a second. So we kicked off actually we've started surveying every 4 weeks. So when we chose within Zendesk back on March 13th to globally put in place a mandatory work from home. So it was slightly ahead of a lot of countries outside of Asia, obviously, and what happened in China. But we put in place a mandatory work from home back at that point. We were concerned as to like, how is this going to work? Like we took the decision, and then, you know, it was one of those change the wheels while you're driving the car type scenarios that we took the decision because we felt it was the best thing for the health and safety of our staff. But at the same time, we also weren't sure how it was going to work. So we came up with a quick, and I'm happy to share them afterwards. I won't remember them all off the top of my head. One of the key things I think with engagement survey is keep it short. People are busy, they don't want to answer 30 questions. I think we've kept ours to 7 questions. So maybe 7 or 9, something like that. But one of the questions that we have gone with is how well has Zendesk done to support you working from home? I can share the exact questions if people are curious afterwards. That was almost like our engagement measure. You know, how engaged are you right now? We didn't use those words. We used questions such as I think we used 2 primary ones. How supported do you feel to work from home right now? And something along the lines of how Zendesk has supported that with tools and processes and means of communication, etc. But we kicked that off a couple of weeks into being in working from home kind of remote mode, or just this climate. And we weren't big users of engagement surveys. We had an annual survey prior to this, and we quickly kind of pivoted to say we need to be taught, we need to get feedback more from how people are doing. We kicked it off a couple of weeks in, and we're doing it every 4 weeks, and we're going out, we're sharing the results with people. We're not taking, you know, whatever, if there's kind of big themes of feedback, we are taking that literally at a leadership level to see what can we do. But then there's also managers, you know, managers will be able to see just some specific, you know, things for their team. But I'm happy to share afterwards with anybody on what our questions are.
It was the speed of that response that I thought was so impressive, Sarah, that, you know, we were very quickly, you know, within days, we were showing our teams the good and the ugly that was there. And then, you know, on the next version, you know, I can see we're already iterating the questions that we're asking based on the feedback that we've had. And people see this loop, they see they see these things being responded to and being listened to and being heard. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I'll confess, it's one of the things that we had to pivot on and change, because previously we'd send out a survey. I think we'd give people almost like 2.5 weeks to respond, and then as a leader, you know, HR would take it back and analyze, and then we'd give it to leaders to take it back and analyze. And honestly, it was probably 2 to 3 months before employees actually saw. And at that stage, sure, you know, life has moved on. So now, especially with how fast things are happening, we released the survey for, I think we only opened it for 4 days, 3 to 4 days, to try and get a higher response as possible. But then we had literally, we didn't even give ourselves a huge amount of time to analyze everything. We just, as quickly as possible, took a look, shared data with our leadership, and then released responses out to managers to go and share with their teams.
Okay, I'm conscious that we are running probably out of time, but let's squeeze in a couple more. A really good one that I think is Zendesk specific, that's just come through. From what size of company do you recommend a central help desk? And it kind of, you know, with that, how many employees do your customers have approximately?
I would say much smaller than you think, actually, and particularly if you're a scaling business. There are so many benefits in investing in your employees and investing in the infrastructure to support them. Really, the sooner you do that, the less of a bottleneck it's ever going to become, and the less chance there is that you're going to suffer from some of the negative effects of not having those things in place. You know, our customer base is extremely varied, and goes from, you know, small businesses with 10, 20 people right the way up to enterprise businesses with tens and hundreds of thousands of people. And I see a use for our technology in all of them.
Yeah, I mean, when I joined Zendesk at the beginning of 2017, we'd obviously already been using like our support tool as our main ticketing system. And my remit at the time, as I said, was across Europe. And at the time, we only had maybe 400 or so people right across Europe. So in Dublin, where I was, there was less than 200, London, maybe 80. So even at that scale, which for me, coming from like a huge BT where there was like tens and tens of thousands, felt, honestly, for me, that felt small. But I was so impressed. So I think Darren's right. I think it depends, you know, obviously it needs to make sense at some type of scale. Maybe it's not just size, but it's location, especially if you have different people in different places and you're not all together, it becomes more important. So yeah, even if it's, you've got like, you know, a handful of people in a couple of different locations, either in the UK or anywhere else, I think it becomes more important.
And of course, the beauty of software as a service, as a type of product that you're buying, it's dependent on the number of licenses. If it's a very small license, very small use case, you know, then you're not having to pay as a major enterprise. A lot of our customers will start with quite a small implementation, even if they're a major enterprise customer. They may have a small piece of functionality that they want to try out, and then just grow from there. So it really scales right the way through.
Brilliant. Well, I think we can probably just about squeeze in one more. Here's another Zendesk specific one. Can you integrate other data into your analytics tool?
Into our analytics tool, yeah, absolutely. And there's a number of different ways that you can do that. So we have Sunshine is our platform. And so if you look at it from a platform point of view, which underpins all the different things that we have as products, you can then use, it's a very open architecture, so you're able to plug lots and lots of different things in and expose those to the agents in one place, as we were talking about.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I think that just about wraps it up. Thank you so much, Darren and Sarah. It's been brilliant. I hope everyone's enjoyed listening to this. And yeah, any other questions that do come through, we'll make sure that we get them answered. So fantastic. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.
Yeah, bye.